Okay, let's start with the constructors in Java. Let me create a package for constructors. So I hope by this time everyone knows that I go ahead, click on package, and then create a class in that. But instead of doing it in twice, I'll do in one single shot. Like I create a class. So when I create a class, I can just write it manually here, saying that what is the package com dot easylearnjava dot constructor demo. Okay, and I will write a class name here like student. Okay. So here I say means a simple example I will go ahead with, like writing some three properties, and every time I create a specific set of variables, every time I create variables, I make them as private in order to make sure that I follow one of the object oriented programming principles, that is nothing but encapsulation. Okay, private int id, private string name, private int age. Okay, three parameters. And the next thing that I do is, since I'm following the concept of encapsulation, I need to give access by providing public getters and setters. Okay, so I say right click, go to source, generate getters and setters, select all, because everything is selected now. Say okay, getters and setters are generated. I say control shift F for formatting the code. Okay, it has formatted the code. Now here, what I will do is, I will try to first create an object for this class and I will print some values. Then we will see what exactly is the constructor in this scenario. Okay.
Hey, Raghu.
Yeah, please go ahead.
So, like, when you're creating this getters and setters,
Uh-huh.
like, is there a rule that says when do you want to put it up, or like you just put it up whenever you have the encapsulation method?
Okay. That's a good question. So let us assume that there are no getters and setters. A simple scenario. Okay. Let us assume that this is how your class is present. So what exactly Java says? Make all your variables as private so that you can have control over the variables that you have created. Now, the next question. If I create a class called demo, any class, any ABC class, BBC, any class, and in this class, if I create an object for a student, can I use any of the properties of student here?
No.
Okay, good. Now the next question. If suppose if you are writing a piece of software and you want to sell it to someone else. So the software that you have written is something, let us assume that for timing you have written a software called as student. Okay. Student, if it says like it has three parameters, and if you sell to someone else, if they buy your product and if they want to use your product, can they ideally use your product or not? Yes or no?
Yes.
Okay, that's good.
Okay.
So they can use your product. So they can create a student object. Now the next question. Once they create a student object, can they see anything inside that student object? Can they access any of its properties?
Without the getters and setters, no.
Without getters and setters. Now, do you
No.
understand? Like without getters and setters, ideally, we means in general, from outside the student class, we can never ever do anything without getters and setters.
Okay. Okay.
Got it?
So,
Go
yeah.
ahead.
So like, what about when? Can you go to student class real quick?
Mhm.
So when you're here and then say you got a private integer ID and then you, let's say you declare the ID,
Mhm.
right? That means the only way we can use it from the demo side is uh, we use the getters, right? We don't use the setters.
Okay. So next question. Let us assume that. So you're talking in the context where we have getters and setters, right?
Yes.
Okay, let me just, okay, so I generated the getters and setters. Now the next question. There are two methods for each property. Okay, get and set. Now tell me what is the use of get and what is the use of set.
Well, the set will set the value, and then the get will get the set value.
Okay, so now let us assume that you bought a piece of software for your school, like a student software. The first thing that you do is, let us assume that you want to store some data in the database for a student who is admitting into your school. So for that student, you need to assign an ID, name and age, right?
Right.
So for in that scenario, which method will you use?
Set.
All the setter methods you will use. So once you
Right.
set all the data, you will store in the database. Now, tomorrow you want to retrieve some student details based on an ID or whatever. So in that scenario, what will you use? Once the data comes from the database and it is present in your object, what will you use to retrieve the data from that object?
The getters.
Getters. So did you understand like in which scenario you use the setter and in which scenario you use the getter?
Yeah. Yeah. So like, I guess in other word, every time you want to input your getters, you might as well input the setters too. I mean, there's no harm with that.
Yeah. See, uh, think getters and setters are as two different functionalities. Okay. So the first thing, do you want to use both at the same shot? Like you set the value and you get the value. Is there any harm? Nothing. Next, all you want to do now is just set the value and store it in the database. After a day, after a month, after a week, after an year, after some time, you want to retrieve the data. Retrieve it and view it by using a getter method. So when are you using a getter method? Maybe whenever you need it. Okay, so there is nothing like a
Mm.
mandatory scenario that you need to use both at the same time or one only or two only. It never matters. Based on your what is your requirement, setting or getting or both, decide and use.
Okay. So like, in practical, whenever we're coding, is it a good idea to like just include both of them at the same time, or?
Yeah, means that's what I told you, right? So in real time scenario, what we will do is, uh, let me take a simple example for your understanding purpose. In the front end, let us assume that the user has logged into Google and he is registering himself. Okay, he is registering himself in the in for Gmail. So in the front end, when he enters his name, age, date of birth, phone number, all those things, the data comes to the server side. On the server side, we will set the data using the setter methods to a user object, user ID, username, user login password, user phone number, like that. We will set everything using the setter method and store it in the database. And after 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, the user wants to change his name or user wants to change his phone number. Then what we do? If he clicks on user settings and user profile, when he clicks on user profile, we need to load the data from the database and display the profile details on the front end or to the user, right? So to display already saved data from the database, we pull the data from the database, then use a getter method, display it to the user saying that, hey user, this is the data. So you say get the data and print it. Clear? Good.
Gotcha. Yes.
Okay, awesome. Any more questions, team? Okay, so since it's good, let me go ahead. I go to demo.java. So the first thing what we did is like I created an student class. Then I created three parameter properties, and then I go to demo.java, means any other class, and I try to create an object for student here. So all I need is a main method first. So here I do like student std equal to new student. Okay. Now I hope most of you might understand. Most of you might understand the scenario like std is a reference variable of type student. The most important thing, team, std is a reference variable of type student, and std is pointing to a student object in the memory. Okay. Now I hope everyone understands that whenever I say new, it means that give me a new memory location for creating an object of this type. Okay. This creating an object for student. Now the same thing, like we saw the same old diagram in the previous scenario session also, but just for your understanding, in the memory, somewhere in the memory, you do have an object. So this object, question to everyone, who will be pointing to this object, or if I want to reach this object in the memory, what exactly I need to use? std. Excellent. Okay. So I use a variable called std. std is nothing but a reference variable. It tells where exactly the object is present in the memory. Okay. So now for your understanding, what I say is, I will try to share that the object is present at 2000 memory location. Okay. And the most important thing is 2000 is a memory location, which is just, I'm just telling for your understanding purpose. And in Java, the 2000 is being stored by std, which means std stores this 2000. Okay. But the most important thing is we can never ever modify any addresses in Java. Okay. Why? Because for those of you who have an understanding of some programming languages like a C, in C language we have a concept of pointers, where in the concept of pointers, when I say that std is storing 2000, then I can modify the pointer and all these things, right? So std can store 2000, and we can never ever modify addresses here. Okay. So std helps us to reach this object. Now when I say a student object is created, student has three properties. Like, what are all the three properties? id, name, and age. Okay. It has three properties: id, name, and age. Okay. All these are present here. Now the next thing, once I create an object, let me print the values for that std. So all I do is sys out. Here I say std, right? The id is std dot get id. I'm just retrieving the id. Okay. I'm not setting anything, but I'm just trying to see what exactly are the values which are assigned to it. The name is, so we know that we have created an object, but we did not assign any values to the properties yet. I did not assign id as 1, name as Raghu, or something like that. But still I'm trying to retrieve and see what are the values that are being assigned. Now once I print it, you might notice that there are some values which are printed like a 0, null, and a 0. Why or what exactly are they? They are nothing but the default values for these data types. So ID is of type int, age is of type int. So for both these variables, 0 is the default value and name is a string, which means it is a class or an object. For that, it assigns null value. Okay, so all the properties in the object are assigned to their default values. Okay, all the uh, okay, all the properties are assigned to those default values. Now the next thing, let me set some values. At least one value I'll set, std dot set id. I'm setting the id and I say the id as 5. Now I'll print the same statement again. Let me just print this out so that it can print a space, a blank space for me, and get id. So now if I print it, initially the id is 0, but since at line number 15 I have modified that to 5, it changes to 5 and the id becomes 5, which means I'm setting a new value here. So what is that I'm trying to do? At line number 9, I'm trying to create an object where the object is created and all the properties are assigned to their default values, and at line number 15 I started assigning some values to that object. Clear to everyone? The next thing here is, when I say I'm trying to set the values and I'm trying to create a value, then the next thing that I do here is I will try to explain how I can do everything in one single shot. Okay, so when I say everything in one single shot, there are multiple steps here. What is that I'm trying to do at line number 9? Create an object, and for that object all the default values are assigned. At line number 15 I'm assigning some value for that. Okay, now let us try to see uh, what exactly is a constructor based on this understanding. Okay, now here, okay, let me leave it like that. Let me go to one more class called test. So in the test, again I will create an object for the student, std equal to new student, and here everyone knows that it is something like it exactly name same name as the student. It has the exact same name as the class name and with some brackets here. Okay, now here in the student class I will write, let for time being let us assume that a kind of a method I'm writing. Okay, whatever I'm writing at line number 9 is never ever considered as a method. It is considered as a constructor, but I will explain the concept of constructor later. But just for timing, just hold on and observe this. I write public student, open bracket, close bracket, body, and close that body. Now test.java, I'm just executing. Let me execute test.java. Execute test.java. Everything is good, no output in the console. Okay, now let me just tweak a little bit. I say sysout, this is a default constructor in student class. Okay, now the same scenario. What I did, I just wrote a sysout statement at line number 10 in student class, and I go back to test.java and I will execute the same program again. In the previous scenario, when I executed, nothing is printed, but here when I print it, when I run it, did you notice here there is something like this is a default constructor in student class. the output is being printed, the same output which is written in the student.java at line number 10. Now let us understand what exactly is happening. Okay, so the highlighted part, till now we did not clearly understand what exactly is this highlighted part, but the highlighted part is nothing but a call to a constructor. Okay, you are calling a constructor in this scenario. So student of, this is nothing but a call to a default. So let us just understand the syntax that I'm writing or the statement. I'm saying a default constructor. I will explain what is a constructor, but why I am telling a default constructor is default means it is not taking any arguments as input. Okay, that is the reason why I'm telling it as default constructor. Okay, now let me go back to student.java, and in student.java let me remove this highlighted part. Okay, let me remove the highlighted part, and I say I go back to test.java and I run it once again. So everything went well, but there is no output in the console, but everything ran still. Now let's understand what exactly is happening or what is a constructor. Anytime you make new and write student and brackets, that is nothing but you are trying to call a constructor in this class, student class. So what exactly is a constructor? A constructor is used while object creation for assigning some default values. Okay, so now how exactly a constructor will look like? What is the syntax of a constructor, or what is the structure of a constructor? In the previous scenario we saw like what is a method and what is the structure of a method, right? So in method creation we understood, like if I go to employee.java, this is what we understood. So this is for methods basically, right? Now let me customize the same structure for a constructor. Constructor is different from a method, and for a constructor we will have access modifiers, well and good. Then we will never ever have a return type in a constructor, not even void. See, you understand that void means you are not returning back anything. You will never ever have void also for a constructor, so no return type. Then method name, like method name here we'll say constructor name, and then input arguments, again they are optional, and constructor body, constructor body, and it will never ever have a return statement. Okay, this is the basic structure of a constructor. So let me write an access modifier. It's public for now, I make it as public. And the most important thing, if you go back to method, when I say method name, you can write whatever method name, like meaningful method names, add, multiply, divide, calculate salary, like that you can write whatever meaningful method names that you have. But in a constructor, when you're writing the name of a constructor, it must exactly, with case, it must exactly match the class name. So I say public, the class name is exactly student, so I say student. Okay, and then constructor will never ever have any other name apart from the class name. Okay, and then input arguments, they are optional, so I made them as optional. And the constructor body, the constructor body is nothing but this is the one. Okay, in this you can write some sys out. This is a default constructor. Okay, so what is happening, default constructor in student class. So what is happening in this scenario, we are writing a default constructor which is not taking any arguments. Now whenever you say new student and you put empty brackets, it means you are calling this default constructor. Okay, So this default constructor is being called. Now, can you add parameters into this constructor? Yes, you can add parameters into this constructor. Next, what is the use of this constructor? We will see slowly. Okay, in this scenario, I will show an example of a real example for a constructor. But for time being, is everyone clear? Like when exactly a constructor is being called and how to write a constructor? Awesome. Okay, moving ahead. Now, let us say that I will add one more parameter in the student class. I will say private string school name. Okay, I added one more parameter just for a meaningful purpose. I've just added that generate getters and setters source generate getters and setters. Select all. Say OK. Control Shift F. Format the code. Done. Now I go back and what I will do here is uh, okay. Before I go to test.java and explain the next steps, just let me take one step back, go to demo.java, and in demo.java, even if I print the school name, what will be the output team if I print school name? What is the output? Anyone? Any guess? Okay, it's not 0. That's good. It is null. N-U-L-L. It is null. It's not nothing also. Why? Because this school name is of type string. So the default value of that string will be null. So null will be printed. So did you notice the school name is null? This is what will be printed for you. Okay. Now the next scenario that I do here is I will try to explain the concept of constructor here. Here what I say is, let us assume that uh, there are 100 students who are coming to join my school. If 100 students are coming, I know that each student will have his own ID, name and age, but for all the 100 students, the school name will be exactly the same thing, right? So I need not always say student 1 dot set school name, student 2 dot set school name, which means like for all the 100 students, I need not every time duplicate the same code again and again and again and again, right? So instead of that, if there is a shorter way of saying that, if I write it once somewhere saying that, hey, whoever comes to my school, make the school name as BHPV. If I can do that, then it means that I'm trying to set the value once and I can reuse every time. So for that, what I do, I will take use of a constructor. If you understand the scenario that I tried to explain, a constructor is something which is used to assign some default values during object creation. Okay, so I say school name equal to, since it is a string, I said BHPV. Okay, so this is what I am trying to say here, school name as BHPV, and I'm writing inside a constructor. The next step what I will do here is, let me create multiple objects here. For now, maybe let me create two different objects and then let me print the values. Excuse me. std1, 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 std1. Okay. Now everyone answer this question. What will be the output for line number 12 and line number 19 only? BHPV. Awesome. Very good. Okay. For both the values at line number 12 and line number 19, the values will be BHPV. Next question. What will be the output for line number 9 and line number 17 only? Okay. There are two things which I asked, like line number 9 and line number 17. So I'm expecting two answers from everyone. Null and 0 is wrong answer. 0 and null is the right answer. Why? Because line number 9 is an int. So the default value for int is 0. So id will be 0. And 17 is a string. So the default value for string will be null. So 17 will be null. So let's just create this and see the output. See here, first it is making a call to the constructor. ID is 0, name is null, age is 0, and the school name is BHPV. And then again it is making a one more call to the constructor, then 0, null, 0, and the school name is BHPV, which means how many objects that I have created here? Two objects. For all the objects, okay, if I create 100 objects using the same syntax like new student, for all the 100 objects out there, okay, the school name by default, even without you trying to set, the student class is setting as BHPV. So for every, if you have 100 students or 1000 students, you can never ever means you need not set the school name again and again. The constructor is setting the value for you. Okay. So now just one more example here. So I say std dot set id as 1 and std dot set name as Raghu, std dot set age as 10 years. Okay, I'll set only three parameters, and then std1 dot set id. Okay, std1 dot set id as 2, std1 dot set name as Naveen, and std1 dot set age as 11. Okay, now just notice here, in this current context I've created two objects and I'm setting only three parameters: ID, name, age, ID, name, age. Okay, I'm not setting school name anywhere, but still the constructor is setting a value for me. So if I print it, everything will be like, I'm just showing the second. Okay, let me maximize this. The output is like 1 Raghu 10 BHPV, 2 Naveen 11 and BHPV. Okay, just let me write this out so that it prints empty space, blank line in between them. So see, this is one call to the constructor, this is the second call to the constructor. Now the next scenario here, when I try to say, okay, at line number 26, observe carefully what I'm trying to do. std1 dot set school name as ABC, or RK. Okay, now I'm interested in the output for line number 17 and line number 31 only. What are the two outputs? Okay, BHPV, RK is one answer. What about others? What is the output for line number 17 and 31 only? Excellent, very good team. Which means what is happening at line number 26? At line number 26, I'm trying to override or change the default behavior given, but for first student object, STD, I'm not resetting the school name. I'm just using the same school name, but for the second student object, I'm changing the school name. Why I explained line number 26 is, many people might think that once we assign a value school name here as BHPV, they will get a doubt. Can we change the value of BHPV to something else or not? The answer is yes, you can always change if you have a setter method available. Do you have a setter method available? Yes, you have a setter method available. So you can change it. Now, let us assume that in the code, okay, whenever you write a code, you say that, hey, for your school, since I am selling the software for your school, I will customize some fields for you. So you say that school name as BHPV so that no one else by mistake also will assign a wrong school name. For that, what I will do, I will remove the setter method and I will sell the software for you. So once I remove the software for a school called BHPV, no one else can by mistake also they cannot change the school name from BHPV to something else. Okay, so this is never ever allowed. So for that school, they need not set the value, but they can always get the value. Why they cannot set the value? Because in the code I have customized the code in such a way that no one else can change the code from BHPV, means the school name from BHPV. So did everyone understand now how I am able to control the properties of a student class by giving the public access modifiers, getters and setters? Clear to everyone? Okay, awesome. Let me take one question, like someone else has written some question. Okay, the question from Adip is like, I have set the school name without the constructor. Oh, okay. So Adip, maybe for your question, line number 26 will be the answer. Yes, you can set the school name even without the constructor also. Okay. So did you notice, like at line number 26, okay, let me revert back the change that I did. If suppose if I have given access modifier set school name to everyone, then what is this test.java? What I can do? I can set whatever school name I want. Okay, so I can set RK, I can set ABC or whatever I can do. So even without constructor also you can do that. But understand the power of a constructor. The constructor, what it is doing. See, if there is no constructor, if you have 1,000 students, for all the 1,000 students, you need to repeat the same code again and again. Set school name as RK, set school name as RK, set school name as RK or BHP, like that. You should write 1,000 statements. But if I can customize it at one single location in a constructor, every time I create an object, it by default gives the name as BHPV. So constructors are used for assigning default values during object creation.
Could you have set it up while creating the variables, like up there with the private string school name?
Yeah, awesome. You can do that also. Private string school name equal to BHPV.
Now, would that make a difference, or is that like
Okay, yeah. One
some kind
second.
of
Yeah,
coding?
yeah. I will take that question. Just a second.
Okay.
So let me just run this. So sorry. Okay. Let us assume that 26 is RK, but see here in the output for line number for this one for line number 17, the output is still BHPV. How you are getting BHPV? Are you using or are you setting in the constructor? No, you are not setting in the constructor, but still you are getting. Why? Because you have set a default value for line number 8 as BHPV. And can you modify something which you have set at line number 8? Yes, you can always go ahead and modify, which we did at line number 26. Because of that, the output for line number 31 is RK, which means you can set it like that and you can also modify it. Okay. Now coming to your second part of the question, does that make any difference? Yes, it makes a difference. When will it make a difference? In the next scenario, it will make a difference, which means if suppose instead, what is that I'm trying to do at line number 8? I'm hard coding a value to the HPV. Let us assume that I want to pass dynamic value every time. Then in that scenario, instead of hard coding it here at line number 8, I can use something similar feature like line number 17, which we will look now. Okay, clear? Now the next concept. In this scenario, what I will say is, yeah, that's what. Okay, so I'm just trying to re-explain that concept again with an example now. But is the concept clear till now? Like what is the default constructor and how you can assign a value? Is that clear, or do you want me to re-explain that? Okay, yes, okay, that is clear, right? So I'm going to the next concept and I will explain whatever I told now. Okay. Now, in this context, what I will do is, let me create one more different class, and here main method. So now the thing that I'm trying to say here is, let us assume that whenever you try to create an object, okay, in the previous test.java, what you did, you created an object at line number 8, and after that you are trying to assign some default values like this, right? So now the requirement is, let us assume that I don't want to do something like this. I want to do everything in one single line, or I want to do everything in one single shot. So how can I do that? I can do it in some simple steps. So what I can say is, I will write the code and I will explain it later. Okay. So I'll say public, or else let me reuse Eclipse feature, one of the features. Right click, source, like generate getters and setters. There is one more property called as generate constructor using fields. So how many fields you want? Let me add all the 4 fields. Say okay. Okay. Now, and the next thing is, many people get confused at this point. This dot id equal to id, this dot name equal to name, school name and all. So for just for your understanding purpose, let me change some of the properties here. Okay, I will explain all these things, team. Just not to worry about this. But see here, doesn't it look like exactly the constructor? Yes, it is exactly a constructor. But what is the difference between the constructor at line number 22 and line number 15? Line number 22 constructor takes in some arguments. Excellent. Which means it can take in some properties as input parameters. Now, the next question. How many arguments I am passing at line number 22? I am passing 4 arguments. The next question, people might think that okay, there are 4 properties, so it can take 4 arguments. Is that what the scenario? No, it is, you can pass n number of arguments to the constructor. You can pass 0 arguments, you can pass 1 argument, you can pass 2 arguments. It's all up to you how many arguments you want to pass. Okay, but ideally we will pass either the same number of arguments which are present in our class or less than that. Okay. Now here I wrote a constructor which can take in 4 arguments as input. Now what I will do here is, observe very carefully in dummy.java what I am trying to do. I will try to create 2 objects. Okay. For our understanding purpose, let me copy paste the same scenario here. So everyone knows this scenario. Control Shift F, format. Okay, everyone knows this. Create a student object, assign ID, name, age, and then I will set the school name also, std dot. Okay, 1 second, sorry. I'm not setting a school name here. Why? Because since this is a call to a default constructor, then the default constructor is already assigning it to BHPV. So now if I go ahead and run it, 1 Raghu 10 BHPV will be the output. Nothing specific in this scenario. Everything is straightforward. Now here comes the next level. So now the requirement I say is, hey, instead of writing like this in multiple lines, can I do it in one single shot? The answer is yes, you can do that. So how can I do that? See here. At line number 19, I say student std1 equal to new student of, okay, new student of, observe here team. In the previous scenario, I modified some of the names like ABCD, BBC, something like that, right? So which is nothing but you can see a constructor here. Okay. Once you see the constructor, okay, the first value I need to pass is int, then string, then int, then string. So int string, int string. So let me pass int as 2 and then the string as Naveen and then the int as 11 and then the string as, if not bhpv, I'm saying rk r. Okay, I wrote a semicolon. Now let me go to test.java. Let me just copy paste the getter methods, sysouts. Okay, now if you notice the difference between line number 7 to 16 and line number 19 to 24, I'm just skipping out these highlighted parts. Okay, I'm not writing those highlighted parts, but still I'm assigning a value. How am I assigning a value? By using line number 19, a constructor feature which can take in some arguments. So now let me debug the program and explain what is happening. I put a debug point at line number 7. So what I do, I click on debug. So for now, I'm telling no team, you never ever say no, always say yes in your examples and make sure that you go to debug mode, observe everything and debug. Okay. So it is at line number 7. Now, what is this student brackets? It is nothing but a constructor. So the next thing that you need to understand here is I am calling a constructor which is present in a different class. So from here, from line number 7, the control will go to the student class constructor. So for that, if you want to go step by step in the same class, like from line number 7 to 9, 9 to 10 and all, you press F6, right? But here you want to go into that constructor which is present in a different class. You want to go into that class. So into, you need to use F5 or this option, step into. So if I say step into, so it went to student class. It is calling this student class constructor. F6. It will print that sysout for you. See, it is printing the sysout. Then the school name. See, observe very carefully, team. In the current context, line number 17 is never ever executed. Okay, it is still waiting. So if I inspect the school name is still null. But now if I complete the execution of line number 17, that is when the object value will be assigned to BHPV. Okay, so what is constructor doing? Constructor is assigning some default values for the objects that are being created. So I say F6. So now if I inspect the school name, did you notice for the current object the school name is BHPV, it has set it. Then I say F6. So where did the control come from? The control came from dummy.java from line number 7 in the main method, right? Now once the execution of this constructor is done, the control will go back to that main method, to that specific line from where this is being called. I say F6. See, it went back to line number 7. So in the line number 7, I say F6 and just inspect std. Once I inspect std, age is 0, id is 0, name is null, but the school name is bhpv. Why? Because this is what the constructor is setting for you. Well and good. Now you are changing all the other rest of the other things. Now if you inspect std, age 10, id 1, name Raghu, and school is bhpv. Now if you print it, the same values will be printed. Well and good. Now line number 19. Observe very carefully. I will go into that constructor. Okay. So which is present in the student class. So for that you should not press F6. You need to say F5. So I say F5. So it will not call the default constructor. It will call a constructor with these number of parameters. So what is ABCD? ABCD is 2. And what is BBC? BBC is Naveen. Age is 11. School name is RK. Okay. So all these parameters are input to this constructor. So what I will do is for all the properties. Okay. So let me quickly draw one more diagram here. So this is std1. Okay. So this is std1. So for std1, okay, for std1 I will assign some default values. Who will assign? See, std1 is created for you now. Once std1 is created, all the values will be default values, 0 null 0 null. But now let me assign the values. Now many people get confused about this dot id. What is meant by this dot id? This means the current class, okay, object. So in the current class object, the id is being set to ABCD. ABCD is nothing but 2. What is the initial value of ID? ID is 0. For that, I will assign ABCD, which means it will become 2. So the ID has become 2. Now, BBC is nothing but Naveen. So it will become Naveen. And now let me explain why I changed ID to ABCD and age to BBC. Or not age, name to BBC. Why? Because when you are using a feature of the Eclipse, what Eclipse does is the argument names which are present here will exactly match the property names and this dot id, which means these are also the property names. So many people will get confused. Hey, what is the meaning of age equal to age or school name equal to school name? This is how many people will get confused. But on the left hand side, all these blue color things, do you notice here? ID, name, age, school name is in blue color, which will exactly match to these property names. So all these things which are present in the blue color are the property names, and all these things which are present in something like a different color, a maroon or whatever color, they match to these property names in the constructor. So they are the argument names. So in general, some people will say, what is age equal to age? This age means the current class object property. To that you are assigning a value which is coming from this property. Okay, so I complete this, go back. Now inspect what happened after line number 19. Notice age 11, ID 2, name Naveen, school name is RK. That is what is being created. So I complete the execution, complete. So it prints to Naveen 11 RK. So is the explanation clear to everyone? The difference between line number 7 and line number 19, clear or not? Okay, awesome. So the next question, taking it to the next level, or maybe I'll just quickly write this. Means this is a simple scenario. Let us assume that you want to give, you say that, okay, let me say that you want to give access, saying that at line number 15 we saw how to define a default constructor. So because of this default constructor, what are we trying to do? We are able to set a default value. You could have set just three. Yeah, Adib, that's what we are trying to understand now. So at line number 15 we gave access mm, through a default constructor. At line number 22 we gave access by setting all the four parameters. But let us assume that there is a requirement which says that if you are trying to sell this software to someone else, they say that, hey, I need to have a constructor which can take in two arguments by default and say that I want to assign age and school name by default to everyone. So for that you need to have an constructor with only two arguments. So what I say is public access modifier, then the constructor name which exactly matches the class name, then what are the parameters that you want to pass? You want to pass two parameters. I say int, then age you want to pass, right? So either you can say age or you can give any name. If you give x, when you're trying to set some values, you will say cx. So to make it more meaningful, I will give as age, and then I say string. I can say s name or school name or whatever parameter I say. Now I say this dot the current object dot I want to set the age equal to age, and the current object dot school name equal to s name. So now see the scenario. If a user wants to pass default values, or no, sorry, if the user wants to call a default constructor, then he can call the default constructor and he can pass three different arguments like this. If the user wants to pass all the values in one single shot, he can call a constructor with all the four arguments. But if the user says that okay, no, I will pass the ID and name, but age and school name should be constant for all this specific grade or something. If he says like that, then he can say student std2. So what is std2? Std2 is a reference variable of type student, which is pointing to the object that we are going to create. So what is that object? New student. Now just assume that when you say new and say student, how many constructors you see here? Three constructors. One is a default constructor and the other one is a constructor with two arguments, age and name. So this is what you want to call. So I select this age. What is the age that I want to pass? Maybe some 10 years, and the student name that I want to pass is Ram. Okay. So now if you notice, the same old scenario will happen. So in the memory there will be an object which will be created for you, and for that if you want to reach that object in the memory, you need to use a reference variable called std2, and by default std2 what it will do, it will refer to a new object that I'm trying to create at line number 27, and for that the ID and name will still be, see the three properties, right? Sorry, four properties. Out of that, ID and name will still be default values 0 and null, but if I try to print the rest of the two values, it will be like 10 and Ram. So the ID is std2 std2 std2. So now notice here, just let me write a sys out to print a blank line. See the last scenario, when I created, the ID is 0, the other one is null, but the age I'm setting it as 10 and the name as Ram. So that is the reason why I'm telling here that for a constructor you can pass in different combinations of inputs. Either you can say zero constructors, which is nothing but a default constructor, or you can pass multiple arguments as input. Either all the four arguments you can pass in one shot, or you can create a constructor based on your requirement, like how many values you want to pass by default. Okay, so that is one scenario. Clear with that question? Okay, yeah, awesome. Now the next step, the most important, the most confusing if you don't understand. Okay, but the most easiest if you understand. Now till date there are three constructors: student, student with four arguments, and student with two arguments. Now the next scenario that I will explain here is, let me create a class like, okay, let me just take it in the same class. See here, this is a call to a dummy constructor, right? Now let me go ahead and remove or else I'll not mess up with this one. Let me create a class, one more class called machine. In the machine, let me just remove this name parameter or keep this name. I'm just changing all the getters and setters and all the names from school name to machine name. Okay, let me say age or lifespan or whatever. Okay, I'll leave it as is. Okay, for time being, let me comment out every constructor here. Okay, no constructors in this machine.java now. I've commented out all the three constructors. Now I say machine demo. Create an object for machine. So the first question, do we have a default constructor in machine.java? Yes or no? Okay, see here, the default constructor is already commented out. Okay, and all the constructors, not only, so everything is commented out. So not yet. Some people say, what about others? Yes or no? Just make it right in. Yes. Okay, so can anyone tell me why or how there is a default constructor in machine.java? Any guess? Okay, then the next question, at line number 7, when I'm calling a default constructor, object is created. That's why. Okay, may not be the right explanation, Adi. I will explain that. Okay, so at line number 7, when I call a default constructor, the first thing that you can notice here is in this current class there is no constructor, like there is no default constructor, but still I can call a default constructor. That's one thing. I will explain that later. Okay, next scenario, I say machine mac1 equal to new machine of 1 comma Ford. Something I'm passing. See, what is that I'm trying to pass? An int, a string, and then an int, and then a string. So do I have a constructor like this which can take in 4 arguments? No. Okay, that's good. So if you understand the scenario, both the default constructor for line number 7 and the parameterized constructor at line number 9, none of them are present in machine.java. Okay, none of them are present in machine.java. See, don't assume that they are present. Okay, let me remove this. Commenting means I'm not writing anything. Okay, nothing is here. None of the constructors are here. But still, line number 7 is not being shown as an error. Line number 9 is being shown as an error. Why? What is happening in this context? The answer is very simple. What is line number 7? Line number 7
Line
is...
number 7.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, the line number 7 is actually pointing to the object machine. to the class.
No. Okay, yeah, line number 7 also goes to the same class. Line number 9 also goes to the same class. The concept here is and very simple and very easy. Understand here. By default, if you don't write any constructor in your class, okay, here, by default, if we don't write a constructor in our class, there is someone else who will write it for us. And the most key important thing is I am only talking about default constructor. Default constructor means a constructor with zero input arguments. Okay, by default, if we don't write a constructor in our class, the Java compiler will write one for us. So where is it writing? It is writing internally, but we will not be able to see that, but we can still use that. Okay, but we can still use that. That is the reason why line number 7 is a call to a default constructor. Even if the default constructor is not present in that machine.java, since the compiler is writing for one for you, that is the reason why you can use line number 7 as a valid statement. But what is the clause here? The compiler will write one default constructor only for us. It will not write any parameterizer constructor. That is the reason why line number 7 is valid, line number 9 is invalid. So now the next question, when I call line number 7, which constructor I am calling, or a constructor written by whom am I calling? Awesome. I am calling a constructor which is given by the compiler. Okay, that is the reason why line number 7 is valid. Line number 9 is invalid because compiler cannot write a parameterizer constructor for us. If you want to write a parameterizer constructor, you go ahead and write on your own. Okay, is the first scenario clear to everyone? Line number 7, 9. Okay, awesome team. Okay, so I hope everyone knows the options like control Z and control Y, do or redo or undo. So I just undid what I did till now, which means like I just brought back all those constructors. But still, don't assume that the constructors are valid here. The constructors are all again commented out still. Okay, they're all commented out. So it's the same old scenario. Line number 7 and line number 9 both are invalid. Okay, now the answer to the question that I asked was like, what or when I make a call to the constructor at line number 7, who is writing that constructor? So everyone told the answer that that is a call to a constructor written by the Java compiler. Okay, answer is very good. That's correct. Now answer the next question. Now I'm uncommenting line number 17 to line number 36, which means I'm uncommenting all the constructors now. Okay, now line number 9 is valid. Why? Because it is not, it matches line number 24, right? Okay, but answer my question. At line number 7, which constructor I am trying to call? What is the constructor, or a constructor given by whom am I calling? Excellent, the one which is written by us. Okay, Sheikh, my question is for line number 7 only. Okay, whose constructor we are calling at line number 7? The answer is we are calling a default constructor written by us in the machine.java class at line number 17. Okay. First, is that clear to everyone? Okay. Now the most tricky part. Okay. What is that we understood now? If I don't write a constructor in the class, the compiler will write a default constructor for me, right? So now I'm commenting out my default constructor. Okay, I'm commenting out default constructor. The question to everyone: if I go back to machine demo.java and at line number 7, when I say machine m equal to new machine, in this current context, which constructor I am calling, or which constructor I will be calling? What is the answer? Compiler is what I'm right. Everyone told. What about others? This one error already. What is that, Adik? What is that you're trying to say? Okay. So my question, Adip, is like when I make a default call, okay, when I make a default constructor call, which constructor I will be calling? A constructor written by me or a constructor written by the compiler in this current context is the question. So most of you told it is a call to the constructor written by the compiler. Okay, but that's the wrong answer. Okay, see, in this context, so in this context, I say machine Mac equal to new machine, and here I'm trying to say line number 7 is, means not me, so the compiler starts complaining line number 7 is an error, but line number 9 is all valid. Line number 9 is valid. Why? Because it matches line number 24, so it is valid. But now line number 7, it starts complaining. Why it starts complaining? Now the next question: when I say new machine, this is a default constructor call, and till now we understood that if we don't write a default constructor, the compiler will write one constructor for us, is what our understanding is. But there is a clause there. So what is that? By default, if we don't write any constructor here, any, okay, if we don't write any constructor in our class, then only the Java compiler will write default constructor only for us. Now the question to everyone: in the current machine.java, do we have any constructor defined or not? Yes or no? Very good. So since we have a constructor, understand the scenario, since there are some constructors, means it's not like multiple constructors. If at least one, okay, if at least one is defined, then the compiler will say, okay, I think the compiler thinks like this. Okay, I think the user wants some parameterized constructors like this. Since the user wants parameterized constructors, which he wants, so the user has customized his requirement and has defined his own constructors. So as a compiler, my job is to give a default constructor if nothing is present. But since there is something which the user has written, so the compiler thinks that okay, it seems it might be the scenario where the user don't need a default constructor. So since we have written a constructor, the compiler will never ever write a default constructor for me. Okay, since the compiler will never ever write, line number 7 is an error in this scenario. Okay, so I will explain few concepts and then I will take questions and ask questions. Now see here, I'm commenting out everything. Once I comment out everything, answer this question: are there any constructors in the current class? Yes or no? Okay, so no, there are no constructors in this class. when there are no constructors, will the compiler give a constructor for me or not? Awesome. Yes, the compiler will give a default constructor for me. So if I go back, line number 7 is valid in this scenario. Why? Because it is calling a default constructor. Now the next question. Are there any constructors in this current class? Yes, very good. Now the next question. Can I, can I make a call to the default constructor in this current scenario? Awesome. I cannot make. Why? Because the next question. Will a compiler write a default constructor for me? Awesome. The answer is again no. Okay. No, Siddharth. The answer is no. Why? Because since there are already parameterized constructors defined, the compiler will never ever write a constructor for you. Okay. So I want every one of you to understand this concept very clearly. Concept is very simple. If you don't understand, it's very confusing. Okay. So since it has a parameterized constructor, compiler is not writing a default constructor. So line number 7 is an error. So in order to make sure that line number 7 is valid, what should I do? Means my requirement is I need to make sure that line number 7, line number 9 both are valid. How can I fix this problem? What is the answer?
Empty constructor should be created.
Very good. Excellent. So the solution for that problem is, since I need both, I will write a constructor with default parameters also in the parent class. Okay. So now everything is good. Clear with this concept? Awesome. So the use of a constructor is based on your scenario, based on your requirement. Try to create objects and try to assign some default values for them when they are being created. And if you want to create everything in one single shot, you can use a parameterized constructor. If you want to create some default values, you can use a default constructor and assign some values. Whatever you want to do, you can always go ahead and do that. Okay. So the constructors basically are used during object creation. Okay. To control the access, like access means to control the data that you're trying to set or to assign some values and all, we use constructors. Okay. Any doubts before we wind up the session for the day? Okay, just call me Raghu. Okay. Awesome. I'm just before I stop the recording, I would just like to say that these are, mean, see, core Java concepts are the most fundamental concepts in Java. If you understand these concepts, understanding the advanced topics is very easy. Yeah. Can I define a constructor in single line? That's what the question of size. Constructors are used during object creation to assign some default values is what is the use of a constructor. Okay. Yeah, that's good team. So the next thing that I say is like please take the time, means do this homework, like create different classes, create constructors, create default constructors, create parameterized constructors and all these things, and just make sure that you practice all these programs so that it would be very easy for you to in the next classes. Okay. I'm stopping the recording.